Hi, students. So I'm going to start this video with chapter 13 because I don't think the preceding chapters are that difficult. We've also talked about them, and I've also talked about them in previous videos. The idea of how to terminate a contract, right? How is it legally and lawfully terminated is the chapter 13 piece of the puzzle. And it obviously, there are a few ways, but as always with lawyers, they got to break it down and be incredibly specific about how things are done. Contracts can be terminated first by doing them. So if, when you go to McDonald's, you order something, you go to the window, you pay them the money, you pick it up and you eat it. That contract is technically terminated at the exact moment when the money and the thing changes hands. You have meeting of the minds and you have full execution of that contract. The other ways that you can terminate them are starting on page 131, and he goes on to talk about whether you perform completely or substantially you perform those contracts is an issue of, again, interpretation of a reasonable person. What I found interesting on page 132 at the bottom, he talks about satisfactory performance of a contract. And the word satisfactory performance, again, you're invoking that reasonable person standard. Like, what is satisfactory? How good is good? How bad is bad? And what would a reasonable person think? Was this contract finished or not? Obvious examples. Contractor comes to your house and redoes this, that, and the other thing, and then leaves a bunch of trash at the curb. Okay, is that contract finished or not? If your garbage removal service says it's going to cost X dollars to take this away, if your contract didn't specifically say whether or not removal of the junk, the refuse, was part of the deal, you have a contractual issue, and people get pretty aggravated, and they'll go to small claims court or even bigger to get the money to make themselves whole. So you're right out of the book. What constitutes satisfactory performance is frequently a disputed question. The courts have adopted, and this is generally true still to this day everywhere, especially when a definite objective measure of satisfaction exists. Yeah, my kitchen is done. That if the contract is performed in a manner that would satisfy, here we go, an ordinary, reasonable person in terms of the contract have been sufficiently discharged. What about substantial performance? The next page of that particular chapter. Pretty interesting, page 133. Under the early common law, and I'm reading right out of the book, each party to a contract had to perform it to the last detail, to the last letter, before a demand for rights under the contract could be made. You know already where we're going with this. This is not the rule anymore of the present day and time. So he talks about an office building, right? The law today can be stated as follows. If a construction contract is substantially performed, here we go again. What does that mean? Reasonable person. Oh, no. Substantially performed, the party performed may demand the full price. So now you got to pay for stuff that isn't done while they work through the punch list. In business, this, it's so aggravating, right? So why do people do business with people they trust or who they get good referrals from neighbors and friends? Because of this very thing. Your reputation is the best thing that you can have in business. There is no price that you could possibly put on it. And here within this listening and talking about contracts piece, this is why. In business, when you don't do what you say you're going to do, and we've had lots of work done on a few different houses over the course of my life, and I'll tell you what, my husband was a bear at getting in people's faces and doing that, which I'm not as good at. I would go with the law side, he'd go with the hey buddy. And we generally were pretty successful. I like to have things nailed down to the detail. He liked to keep it a little fuzzy so that he could say to him, hey, buddy, can you do this over here? And hope that the guy wasn't going to dig him for another $250 or $300. That's actually, that's a thing between the different ways that people have when you're negotiating contracts in a business situation. There are two ways to look at it, and then there's, of course, the middle ground, but we generally fall to on one side of the spectrum or the other. You can think about yourself and how you deal with situations where you want more than maybe what you contracted for, or you're halfway through a deal and you see that you need something more than what is written in a written contract. And these issues come up in every single possible contract, right? They talk, basically, I want to touch this on page 134. He talks about discharging a contract by operation of law. And he's got three examples: discharge in bankruptcy, the running of the statute of limitations, and altering a written contract. Okay, so contracts in bankruptcy, these are pretty interesting. If you are in a contract with somebody who ultimately then files for bankruptcy, this is a federal statute. It's in the Constitution of the United States. So anywhere in the United States or territories, if you want to go bankrupt and avoid your debts as incurred, or pieces of those debts, you must do so in federal court. It's a pretty expensive process, and it has to be done in the federal court located closest to where you are. Bankruptcy in contracts can be discharged in bankruptcy. So if you owe somebody $25,000 and you go bankrupt, you can technically avoid paying that debt and liquidate it in bankruptcy court. And it's a pretty refined area of the law. You don't go down the street to the guy who did your mother's will and ask him or her to take care of your bankruptcy. Your best bet, if you do have to go bankrupt as an individual or in a small business, what you need to do is go to a bankruptcy lawyer closest to the courthouse where you're going to have to go through the bankruptcy, and you do the travel on your own time, as opposed to paying the lawyer down the street to do the travel to Syracuse or Albany, or in Florida, to Miami or Orlando. There is not a bankruptcy court on every corner, and at some points they used to come around kind of traveling circus kind of thing and do it locally, and now not so much after COVID, what I hear. So when you go into bankruptcy, you are looking to discharge the debts, and the contract that you entered into may be voided by the bankruptcy court. If you owe money for services that are already rendered, part of being in bankruptcy will be the requirement that you make a schedule of, this is how much I can actually earn, and this is how much I can actually pay, and I got to keep a roof over my head and make my car work and put food on my table. And after that, I have X left over, and that X will be meted out by the judge, the trustee, who's like a mini judge, and the actual bankruptcy judge, who generally rubber stamps whatever the trustee's plan is that they come up with, he or she. And your debts will then be discharged or paid off. Usually, you must come up with a plan to pay them off over time. That's actually called bankruptcy reorganization. And that plan to pay them off over a period of time, if you don't do it, the creditor, the person to whom you're making the payment, can come back to the court and say, hey, Joe is not making payments. I don't want any more payments. I want my entire amount. And they have a hearing and so forth. Anyway, and then you're ordered, just like a regular judgment, to do whatever the judge says you got to do. Bankruptcy is a pretty interesting and, as I said, complicated field of law. A lot of it is now done completely online, but you do have to go to counseling beforehand and make sure you figure out how not to get yourself into the same jam again, whether it be personal or business. And then you'll have ultimately the plan for reorganizing your debts and paying them off. And then if you can't reorganize because you literally have absolutely no money, then you can discharge and pay cents on the dollar. Here's a trick that people actually use, right? So when you file for bankruptcy, uh, it the petition for bankruptcy stops, or in the law they call it staying. It stays every single pending lawsuit anywhere on the planet. That means lots of times in the past, and it's still done presently, if you fall behind in your mortgage payments and the bank sues to foreclose on your home, people will run to bankruptcy court and file a bankruptcy, which automatically stops the mortgage foreclosure. Now, don't take this wrong. That means you can stay in your house while the wheels of the bankruptcy court churn on. It doesn't mean that you escape that debt, remember, because as we all know or have heard, because it's actually part of the next section of business law, Biz 204, the mortgage attaches to the land and the note is what you have to pay back. So if you borrow money to buy a piece of property, the mortgage is still sitting on that land, clouding the title to the land. It has to be paid off. But boy, it's a great relief if you can't pay your bills because you racked up $25,000 on Visa and then you lost your job and somebody got sick and you racked up more. And you're like, gosh, I'll file for bankruptcy because now they're foreclosing on my mortgage and I can't lose my house. I need to buy time. Bankruptcy, in many instances, does just that. It buys you time. I'm already at 11 minutes. Okay, so we're going to finish up contracts in MindTap. It's, as I said, it's not that hard. Please do that work and do it by, I think I have you until the 28th or 9th of November, right through the holiday. Quick blurb on the holiday: the college will be closed Wednesday, Thursday, Friday of Thanksgiving, which is next week. I'm looking at my calendar here. It's now 11/14. So the college closes 23rd, 24th, 25th, happy Thanksgiving, and then Saturday and Sunday, the 26th and 27th. Be prepared when we come back from Thanksgiving. It's a hot run to the finish line because the end of the semester is only a couple weeks away after that. So yeah, we'll be wrapping it up fairly quick. Just a little preview, your final will be open book online, probably directly. I'm going to try to put it rather than this place and that place, right on your a tab that says final exam for the very end of that last week. And you'll have a week to do it, just as a little preview. And no exceptions, because I got to get the grades in at a certain time and I can't give any kind of extensions, etc. So plan ahead. And it will be open book, open notes, and you go back and watch the videos, but I will put a time limit on it. You're not going to get to be able to take the final for 34 hours so that you can check every single question. But of course you can check them as you're going along or have your notes. Anyway, more on that later. Thank you. Have a great week. And please remember to support our deployed Marines. We're collecting on all 3 campuses items to be sent over there to them for a holiday package. They want foot powder. They want stuff to put into water to make it taste better. Protein bars, individually wrapped snacks, nuts, sunflower seeds. There's a list up on the North Country webpage, and the people over at the Malone American Legion here are packing the box and actually going to send it for us, which is a huge expense, over to Marines stationed in the desert. No chocolate, but any kind of hard candies that don't have melty things in them. And magazines and puzzle books, and they love muscle car magazines. My son used to like, they'd get dog-eared passing those around. So no chocolate, no booze, no porn, and it's really greatly appreciated. It's the best thing we can do. Have a good one.